The truth occurs. The truth occurs.
Hi everyone, I just want to give you a quick update on the Occupy Wall Street situation, or rather my concerns with it. Well, it's still going strong and now it has spread to other cities. Occupy Boston protesters set up tent city. Occupy Chicago meets police resistance, vows to keep vigil. And there's even Occupy LA, which on the bright side has the support of city council. Like I said in my last vlog about this, so far it's been groovy in a 60s kind of way, and I can dig it, but I'm concerned that something scary might come out of it. Those who are in charge have taken a long time to set things up the way they are now, and they don't want to let that go. In fact, their plans are for, complete tyrannical control, corporate control, world domination, population control, and things like that. So they're probably not about to say, yeah, let's just, make some kind of agreement with these people and kind of give them what they want, because they don't like the way that we're running the show, because they want to keep running it the way that they're running it and worse. And, for them, it's all kind of military strategy, and so they look at all angles. And of course, they've made provisions for how to deal with civil unrest. Army Strategic Shock Report says troops may be needed to quell U.S. civil unrest. The document was called Known Unknowns, Unconventional Strategic Shocks in Defense Strategy Development. Now what's weird is that, to me, the way they use the word strategic shocks, it sounds like they're using the shocks as part of the strategy. The report says that they might have to use the military to quell domestic disorder. So they say that widespread civil violence would force the Department of Defense to reorient their priorities. Then they give a long list of things that could be paths to disruptive shock, and then they give recommendations on how they might deal with this. They say that under the most extreme circumstances, this might include use of military force against hostile groups inside the United States. And you could think, well, if there were some terrorist groups or something and they have to protect the people, but it depends how you define a terrorist. Could it be a protester? So, okay, they're mulling over the use of the military for strategic shock in case of civil unrest. But that's not all they're doing. This is from globalresearch.ca 2009, Preparing for Civil Unrest in America, Legislation to Establish Internment Camps on U.S. Military Bases. So they're basically saying that a bill called National Emergency Centers Establishment Act, or H.R. 645, calls for the establishment of 6 national emergency centers in major regions. And if you think this is some kind of, FEMA camp, we're all going to be interned conspiracy theory, here's the original bill. Well, here it is. They really did do that. So they said that they were going to establish these emergency centers to provide housing and other aid to people caught up in an emergency or major disaster. But then it also says that the camps can be used to meet other appropriate needs as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. So appropriate needs could be stuffing all these protesters into the camps to quell civil unrest. And here's what Ron Paul said, is quoted in this article: the fusion centers, militarized police, surveillance cameras, and a domestic military command is not enough. Even though we know that the detention facilities are already in place, they now want to legalize the construction of FEMA camps on military installations using the ever popular excuse that the facilities are for the purpose of a national emergency. With the phony debt-based economy getting worse and worse by the day, the possibility of civil unrest is becoming a greater threat to the establishment. One need only look at Iceland, Greece, or other nations for what might happen in the United States next. And Ron Paul said that in 2008. Also in this article by Professor Chossudovsky, it says, when people across America whose lives have been shattered and destroyed come to realize the true face of the global free market system, the legitimacy of Wall Street, the Federal Reserve, and the U.S. administration will be challenged. A latent protest movement directed against the seat of economic and political power is unfolding. They said that back in 2008, and that's basically exactly what's happening now. So where is this going to go? Are they going to use the military to deal with these known unknowns? Are they going to actually use those FEMA camps? Those articles were from 2008, 2009, before the uprisings in the Middle East and before the London riots. But here's an article from August of this year. Military plans to squash civil unrest in the USA. To me, this is the scariest one because they're talking about something called Con Plan 3502, which they say deals with the Department of Defense and U.S. military's plans for the use of deadly force, detention, and interrogation of U.S. civilians. With the G20 last year, we were pretty shocked at what happened up here in Canada. They didn't use deadly force, but they did use detention and interrogation on people who hadn't committed any kind of crime. They were just protesting. So looks like the US has all that and more up their sleeve for Americans. Here's what it says in what is now called Con Plan 3502, the Domestic Operational Law Handbook. This is what it states. Military forces have the authority to detain rioters, looters, or other civilians committing criminal offenses. If civilian police are not available, CID agents or military police may conduct interrogations only if the interrogation is essential to the civil disturbance mission. Depends how you define rioters. I guess that depends a lot, how the press defines them. You could be, allowed onto a bridge, for example, and then be accused of storming your way onto the bridge. Depends also on how you define essential. I think that whenever they want to do something, they just say that it's essential. And it goes on to say the U.S. Army Field Manual 319.5 lists instructions for, quote, searching and detaining individuals, conducting riot control operations, as well as creating temporary detention facilities. I think that probably most of you realize that this is real. I mean, this is what you're dealing with. This is the kind of beast that you're coming face to face with. And this is why I'm so worried about all this, because they have planned for all these things. They've done it here in Canada. Toronto was horrible. I know people who were, handcuffed and flex cuffs for so long that their hands swelled up. And people, they were just deprived of every basic necessity. They were barely given enough food and water to stay alive. There were people who were not given their medication and had, diabetic crises and things like that. Their rights as human beings were absolutely not respected. This is what you're dealing with, and that's Canada. It's no different in America. You'd think it would be even worse in America, probably. So at this point, I think, two things could happen. Either this will peter out, or you might actually be dealing with this kind of stuff. Deployment of troops against civilians, detention in temporary facilities, FEMA camps, and use of military force and interrogations. This is one of the possible outcomes. I also sometimes wonder whether maybe this is something that the United States government, or I don't like to say United States government because it really comes from higher up, but that this is something that the puppet masters want for the United States. They want this kind of civil unrest to usher in the next stage of the police state, to bring in new laws, to set new precedents. That this can be used to their advantage. And on one hand, they'd like you to believe that they have planned for everything and thought of everything, and everything is by design. I don't think that everything is always by design. Like, I don't think necessarily, well, maybe it is, but I don't know, but it doesn't mean necessarily that this protest was instigated by design to usher in the next plan. But they have, contingency plans for everything. So if this happens, well, they have a plan for how to deal with that. They don't leave any loose ends. So that's where I'm at with this. And again, not trying to be cynical, but look, this is what you're dealing with. So let's hope that it, again, stays groovy in a 60s kind of way, and that you don't actually have them using the FEMA camps. I like to think it's not going to happen, but, let's hope that I'm right. And, well, thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.